Hello, welcome back for today's point about Africa Mining Industrial Strategy 2027 to 2037 6 Model Best Practice Framework Model. What it does best: EU strategic regulation, standards, sustainability, recycling, USA R&D, innovation, commercialization, private capital, China processing, industrial scale, infrastructure, complete value chain, South Korea export, manufacturing, batteries, industrial clusters, Russia geological planning, metallurgy, deep processing, materials, Japan resource SE. Security, stockpiles, overseas investment, quality, best practice. Africa should adopt strategic mineral lists, strategic project designation, supply chain monitoring, circular economy research, rightward arrow pilot, rightward arrow demonstration, rightward arrow commercial scale mine, rightward arrow processing. G rightward arrow chemicals, rightward arrow materials, rightward arrow components, rightward arrow manufacturing materials, rightward arrow components, rightward arrow finished products plus supplier ecosystems. Low NG term geological strategy, metallurgical capacity, advanced materials, domestic equipment, long-term offtake, strategic reserves, resource diplomacy, technology partnerships. 1. EU best practice ST. Strategic regulation and circular economy, EU practice, strategic / critical raw material classification, African adaptation, African strategic minerals list, strategic project design. Asian proposed African application, African Strategic Minerals Act plus Strategic Projects System, African Critical Minerals Technology Agency, AFRI. Can Mining Industrial Economic Corridors, AFR. ICAN Manufacturing and Export Champions Program, AFRI. Can Geological and Metallurgical Sovereignty Program, AF. RICAN Resource Security and Investment Corporation. African Strategic Mining and Industrial Projects, ASMAP, faster permitting for strategic projects, supply chain monitoring. Recycling targets, environmental and social standards, diversification of supply. Years single window strategic project approval, African Mineral Intelligence and Supply Risk Platform, African Circular Minerals Program, Responsible African Mining Standard, RAMS, African Supply Security Strategy, Mine plus Processing plus Recycling considered together, Integrated Mine to Industry Project Approval. Core lesson: Africa shall LD regulate minerals as part of industrial, energy, technology and economic security policy, not merely as a mining sector. 2. USA best PR. Actis Innovation and Commercialization, US practice, Governm. NT supported R&D pilot projects, demonst. Ration projects, University, Industry Research Venture Capital, Govern. MENT procurement. African Adaptation, African Critical Minerals Technology Agency, International / Regional Mineral Pilot Plants, Commercial Scale Demonstration Facilities, African Mining Research Networks, African Mining Tech Venture Fund, African Industrial Procurement Program, Technology Commercialization Research, Rightward Arrow Company, Rightward Arrow Export Recycling and Substitution R&D, Mineral Recovery and Alternative Material Programs. Core lesson: Africa sh. Old fun technologies that can become factories, not only technologies that can become papers. 3. China best practice. Complete industrial value chains. Chinese practice, African application, regional smelters / refineries, mining industrial economic zones, large-scale processing, integrated industrial clusters, infrastructure linked to industry, mine plus rail plus power plus port plus factory, complete supply chains, large industrial champions, manufacturing scale, strong supplier ecosystems, export-oriented production. Mine, rightward arrow chemical, rightward arrow material, rightward arrow component, rightward arrow product, African strategic industrial companies, regional production platforms, African industrial SME networks, AFCFTA plus global export markets. Example: DRC, Zambia Copper Belt. Stage: African industrial development 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11. Copper / cobalt mining, concentration, smelting, refining, copper cathode wire rod cable motors / transformers, electrical equipment, EV / battery components, African infrastructure plus global exports. Core lesson: mineral sovereignty is not simply owning the mine, it is controlling progressively more stages of the value chain. 4. South Korea best practice manufacturing and export. Korean practice materials manufacturing, African application, battery, alloy, and advanced material plants, component manufacturing, motors, cables, electronics, machinery, large industrial champions, African global companies, SME supplier networks, hundreds of local suppliers around major projects, export orientation, battery ecosystem, corporate R&D skills development. Example: lithium. Manufacture for AFCFTA plus global markets. African battery material and battery clusters industry funded African R&D centers engineering and technician pipelines. Lithium ore rightward arrow concentrate rightward arrow lithium chemicals rightward arrow cathode/anode materials rightward arrow cells rightward arrow battery packs rightward arrow EV/storage rightward arrow export. Example, copper. Copper ore rightward arrow concentrate rightward arrow cathode rightward arrow wire rightward arrow cable rightward arrow motor rightward arrow generator rightward arrow electrical equipment rightward arrow export. Core lesson: Africa should not stop at refining. The highest industrial value increasingly comes from materials, components, and finished products. 5. Russia best practice geological and metallurgical sovereignty. Russian practice African application long-term mineral resource planning African 30-year geological strategy geological exploration continental geological intelligence system national mineral resource database African geological data platform deep processing regional metallurgy/refining hubs metallurgical expertise advanced materials domestic equipment capability resource to industry planning technical education. Core principle: African Metallurgy and Materials Institute titanium, nickel, copper, specialty alloys, PGMs African mining equipment industry mineral rightward arrow metallurgy rightward arrow manufacturing geologists, metallurgists, engineers, technicians. There can be no genuine mineral sovereignty without geological sovereignty. Africa therefore needs geology rightward arrow exploration rightward arrow resource definition rightward arrow mining rightward arrow metallurgy rightward arrow materials rightward arrow manufacturing. Rather than simply geology rightward arrow foreign company rightward arrow mine rightward arrow export. 6. Japan best practice resource security and long-term planning. Japanese practice resource diplomacy African application African Resource Security Corporation ARSC overseas mineral investment African sovereign/development finance equity strategic stockpiles African strategic minerals reserve long-term offtake supply diversification African strategic offtake platform multiple African regional suppliers high-quality manufacturing African precision manufacturing standards resource recycling continental circular minerals network. Technology partnerships long-term planning. Example: African International Industrial JVS 20, 30-year mineral security strategies. African mine left right arrow African refinery left right arrow African manufacturer left right arrow international buyer. Supported by 10, 20-year offtake arrangements where commercially appropriate. Core lesson: resource security must be planned before a supply crisis occurs. 7. 6 models rightward arrow 1 African System Industrial Function Strategic Regulation Best Model EU African Objective Strategic Minerals Act. Best Model African Objective Industrial Function Environmental Standards EU Circular Economy R&D. Commercialization Industrial Scale Processing/Refining Infrastructure Manufacturing SME. Suppliers RAMS EU plus Japan Continental Recycling System USA African Critical Minerals Technology Agency USA China. Korea Pilot rightward arrow Demonstration rightward arrow Commercial Plants Mining Industrial Corridors Region. AL Processing Hubs Mine, Rail, Power, Port Corridors African Industrial Champions Korea plus Japan African Supplier Networks Geological Intelligence Russia Continental Geological System Metallurgy ADB. Advanced Materials Resource Diplomacy Strategic Reserves Long-Term Offtake Contin. Entel Market Russia African Metallurgical Capability Russia plus Japan Materials R&D/Manufacturing Japan Strategic Mineral Partnerships Japan JA. Pan AFCFTA African Mineral Reserve Bankable Industrial Projects African Manufacturing Market A. Proposed AF. Recon Institutions #Institution/Program 1 African Strategic Minerals Act 2 African Strategic Projects Authority 3 Responsible African Mining Standard RAMS 4 African Circular Minerals P. Rogram Main Model EU 5 African Critical Minerals Technology Agency ACMTA USA 6 African Mining Innovation Fund USA 7 African Industrial Procurement Program 8 African Min. Aral Processing Platform 9 African Mining Industrial Economic Zones 10 African Infrastructure Corridor Authority 11 African Industrial Champions Program 12 African Mining Supplier Network 13 African Geological Intelligence Authority 14 African Metallurgy and Materials Institute 15 African Resource Security Corporation ARSC 16 African Strategic Minerals Reserve 17 African Long-Term Offtake Platform 18 African Mineral to Manufacturing Mission USA China Korea KO REA Russia Japan JA Pan Japan 9 What Africa should not copy model: avoid EU excessive bureaucracy and slow permitting, USA relying exclusively on private capital for strategic infrastructure, China excessive concentration, environmental costs, and opaque practices, Korea excessive concentration of economic power in giant corporations, Russia excessive state control and geopolitical isolation, Japan dependence on imported raw materials. Africa should take methods, not reproduce entire political or economic systems. 10. The new African mining value chain stage. African objective 1. Explore 2. Finance 3. Mine. Geological intelligence plus AI exploration. African plus international capital. Competitive, safe, and responsible mining. 4. Concentrate regional beneficiation. 5. Process 6. Refine. 7. Chemicals. 8. Materials. Smelting / hydrometallurgy, high purity metals, battery and industrial chemicals, cathodes, anodes, alloys, powders. 9. Components, cables, magnets, motors, electronics. 10. Manufacture batteries, vehicles, machinery, aerospace, electronics. 11. Consume. 12. Recycle. 13. Export. AFCFTA continental market, circular mineral economy, global high value exports. Supporting every stage. Energy plus rail plus ports plus water plus digital infrastructure plus R&D plus skills plus finance plus standards. 11. The 6 lessons in one sentence. Country EU strategic lesson: control the rules and standards. USA China control the technology and commercialization. Control the processing and industrial ecosystem. South Korea control the manufacturing and export capability. Russia control geological knowledge, metallurgy, and materials. Japan secure resources, finance, and markets decades ahead. African strategic 4. MULA EU standards plus US innovation. Plus Chinese industrial scale plus Korean manufacturing plus Russian geological / metallurgical capability plus Japanese resource security plus African resources plus African energy plus AFCFTA market. Final objective: knowledge. Rightward arrow resources, rightward arrow processing, rightward arrow technology, rightward arrow materials, rightward arrow components, rightward arrow manufacturing, rightward arrow African market, rightward arrow recycling, rightward arrow global exports. That transforms the strategy from African mining into an African mineral to industrialization system, with mining serving as the upstream foundation for steel, batteries, automotive, aerospace, energy, electronics, construction, machinery and advanced technology. Thank you. See you soon.